Welcome to Get Amplified from the Amplified Group, bringing you stories to help leaders in the tech industry execute at speed through the power of working together. Well, it's a gloomy December day, but the Christmas lights are on, so we're cheery. What's it looking for deeper stock, Mr. Vicky?
It's pretty gloomy here too, I'm afraid. Yeah, but we have
Fantastic.
got
Happy
Christmas
days.
cheer.
And talking to Chris Cheer, who on the podcast today?
Yeah, so Sam, when we were doing the prep for the EUC Community Forum, I think we realised that the podcast would have been going 5 years in January. So firstly, I want to just say thank you, Sam, for putting up with me for 5 years.
You're very welcome.
It's been
a struggle at times. Well,
cheeky,
all the time.
Cheeky. So the fact that it's 5 years, I was thinking, wow, who have we had on as a guest that would make an incredible Christmas special for us? And as you can imagine, it didn't take a lot of thinking about to think. So
Santa.
Exactly. We have got Santa. Santa is coming in the form of Mr. Mark Templeton. So Mark,
wonderful.
It's wonderful to have you as a guest. Thank you so much for making the time for us again.
Oh, it's really great to be here, and especially in the Christmas season and at a time of year where everyone is, reflecting on the year past, but really planning for the year ahead.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Brilliant. So, Mark, really, you need no introduction. Everybody knows who you are, and of course you've been on before, so that's all good. But maybe you can give us an update on what you've been up to since the last time we spoke.
Well, wow. It's been a busy year. I'm continuing to, give back is probably the theme with board service. So I'm on the board of directors of 2 public companies and 3 private companies. I am also doing a project in the CEO mentoring area that's very, very interesting. And every one of these things is rewarding me. And so that's been a busy part of the year. And then the other thing is, the family's growing. I've got 3 grandchildren now, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So
wow.
Yeah, so
you are going to have the best Christmas.
Yeah, the best spelled
expensive,
chaotic.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
But yeah, it's just a great time of year, and we've had a great 2024, and looking forward to another great year in 25.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, it's great to hear that you're giving back and helping other people on the path that you've been on. So we wanted to bring this podcast together, I guess, as a little bit of a Christmas gift for our listeners, right?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it too, given that you all wanted to do a Christmas special. And I was thinking, first of all, my gift that I try to give not only at Christmas, but every day is, the team that helped me in my career. I always tell them that my gift to them is a lifetime subscription to me. That means anytime I can be helpful in, the development of their careers and lives, etc.
Wow.
I'm here for them, because I think we don't talk about gratitude enough, and getting up every day and remembering who you have gratitude for and what you have gratitude for is important, and then doing something about it.
Yeah.
And then second thing is at Christmas, we're out shopping and thinking of special gifts to give family, friends, etc. But I think this is a good time of year to also think about yourself and give yourself a gift, and a gift that I've given myself year after year after year after year, going back to actually my first year at Citrix, was to reflect on myself and figure out, what kinds of things I would do for personal development. So the gift of personal development is something to give to yourself so you can improve and be a better leader, manager, whatever your role happens to be, a better husband, wife, uh, son, daughter, grandparent, whatever.
Yeah. So this is growth mindset, right? That's what we're talking about here. Continuous improvement. What makes that so important?
Well, it makes it important. It makes it important because, especially in the industry, in technology, et cetera, that moves so fast, and where you generally find people who are pretty ambitious, and your ambition needs to line up and match your ability to self-develop, because you can only manage a team, a growth team, if you can stay out ahead and not be the bottleneck to growth. And the way to avoid being the bottleneck is self-development and really, prioritizing that and owning it yourself. And that philosophy comes from a couple of places. First of all, when I was appointed CEO at Citrix, I drew the short straw. And as I thought about it, and I loved the company from the day I joined, I never wanted to be a bottleneck to growth. And so in thinking about how do I avoid that, I said I have to own my own personal development so that I'm not an obstacle to growth, which then, every over the New Year's weekend, I would sit down and sketch out, all right, here's where I'm doing okay, but these are my flat spots, and here's what I'm going to do this year. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to do a seminar, an online training course. I'm going to attend a conference. I'm going to meet some new people that will, stretch me, whatever those things are. And so that's the first reason. The second reason is in a larger organization, where you're having to choose people to promote, et cetera, whether it's a sort of an incremental direct promotion or a leapfrog promotion, you're looking for those that are ambitious enough to develop themselves and do it proactively, as opposed to the person who says, well, the company needs to develop me more and puts it on the company. And I always felt like, no, you need to put it on yourself. And the great thing about doing that is it's a Darwinian kind of process, and it's a self-selection process. So in a larger organization, it's easier to sort, those who are very ambitious and are acting on it versus those who are ambitious and waiting for the company to develop them.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. People who go out there and grab it rather than waiting for it to happen to them. I was thinking about that as the anti-Peter principle, maybe. I don't know whether you ever read the book. It's from a million years ago. I think my dad had it, and it was the Peter principle. And the theory was people rise to their level of incompetence, because if you're good at something, you get promoted to the level beyond. Yeah. In order to ward off the Peter principle, you have to keep developing yourself, right?
That's right, exactly. And
I don't know whether that book is still in circulation, but the principle surely holds true.
Yeah, and it requires a personal characteristic of introspection and being brutally honest about yourself. And then, if you're managing people, one of the key questions you should be asking all the time of your team, how can I be a better leader? Right? Tell me where my flat spots are, and not be afraid of those answers, because feedback like that is a blessing, as opposed to people being afraid to be direct and honest. And then you're all on your own. You're all on your own, and it's always better to travel in a pack and have a team and a band around you that can help you.
We talked about the band thing last time, didn't we?
Yeah. It's just reminded me as you were talking there, Mark. So yesterday I was fortunate enough to be leading a challenge day at the university where I'm doing some lecturing. And actually, the first, maybe 10 slides that I had, your picture was up quite a lot because we were using your myths of leadership. And the ones, and particularly around not having all the answers yourself and being able to ask for help. But it's very much related to attitude, isn't it? Of you recognize that you need to develop and that you haven't got all the answers. And it's really fascinating working with some of the leaders that we do. We engage the best with clients that ask for help because they don't think they've got all the answers and they need to grow. Whereas it's immediate when we can have a conversation and understand, actually, you think you've got all the answers yourself. So this is it's
a bit like a combination of humility and confidence versus arrogance. Those who think they know it all have arrogance. Those who understand that they still need to learn are humble in and of themselves, but also have a certain confidence that they still have value even as they go through that process of developing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. It's a fine line between having confidence and then asking for advice and saying I don't know. And it gets down to your attitude and understanding yourself. But I think the thing is, usually you should have an opinion, at least of some kind, so that you're checking your opinion against the advice and thoughts of others. And it sends a great message of respect for others and good listener. And again, as a leader, people want a voice, and especially sort of the younger generations. I'm from the old school and think I successfully crossed the Rubicon there. But millennials and X and Z and all these other generations have grown up in an environment where they're born digital, and it's very easy to have a voice, and they want to have a voice, and so it sends that message as well. And then as a leader, you have to draw the line between where people have a voice, but explain to them where they have a vote versus not have a vote, and that's a fine line in and of itself as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder if somewhere in all of that there's what I think of it as almost sort of service through leadership. So you said about being, asking how I can be a better leader. I used to try and think of it as how can I better serve my people, the people that were in my group that effectively made me successful, because it wasn't me, it was the gang that I amassed that had the brains. And I quite like that sort of service through leadership, or leadership through service, whichever way around you want it.
Yeah. Well, I think the servant leader model is reasonably, I'd say reasonably well documented and discussed, et cetera. And, that's my very natural sort of way of leading and working with teams. Some of that was, my dad was very much a role model for that. And when I worked, summers and, holidays, et cetera, at his factory, I watched him, sort of get everyone together, give assignments out, and then tell everyone what assignment he was going to give to himself. And he would typically take the worst assignment. And he set an example around, being hands-on, being, part of the team, part of the band, but also expressing that he would never ask anyone to do something that he wasn't willing to do himself. By doing sort of the ugliest, kind of task.
Running to the fire, picking up the heaviest load, shoveling the ugliest whatever. Yeah.
And it
Yeah, I agree with
inspires
that.
people, and it inspires people to give more than maybe they even understand they can give and that they have to give.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other description of leadership that I really love is General Stanley McChrystal's. He talks about leading like a gardener. And so you create the environment for other people to grow. And I think the way that
Wow.
you
Yeah, I
led
like
us
that.
at
That's powerful.
Citrix is
Yeah.
absolutely that. Creating that environment for me is just so important.
Yeah, well,
That's really cool.
obviously, I agree with that. When I think of, those years, those many years, and where my pride in that journey comes from, it really comes from seeing, all my pupils like you all,
Yeah.
okay, um, you know, not only growing at Citrix, but then going
Other
out
organizations.
and
Yeah.
growing other organizations, et
Yeah.
cetera. And that's a bit lasting, very deep in the heart kind of pride.
Yeah.
And that comes from being a servant, and part of being that servant is being a teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so teaching is kind of important in leadership because you're trying to inspire your team to develop and learn new things, etc. Let them make mistakes, and then find out what they've learned from them because your scars are your best teachers, and
Mm.
those are the things that you turn, from pain into wisdom. And the more scars you have early in your career, the more years you have to compound the benefit of having those scars and learn,
Mm.
and to apply to, new teams, new projects, new companies, wherever your career leads you.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
Mark, you have I know been helping Professor Mark Baker at Cranfield Business School in his CEO research that he's been doing. And I know you talked to him about the foundations of leadership.
Right.
And so, as we've just been talking about leadership here, I know you've got 4 different areas and 4 different types of books, I think, that you refer to in your foundations. Are you able to share those with us?
Yeah, I'd love to. And the context for this is the research that they're doing is trying to build and refresh a model um, around strategic renewal. Some people, which is a great term, by the way, but a lot of companies will call it strategic planning, et cetera, but strategic renewal. And obviously, over the 16 years I was CEO at Citrix, we had, multiple times when we had to really focus on strategic renewal. And in order to keep growing and keep moving toward our North Star, which we call the virtual workplace. I always felt required was for everyone involved in that process to have a strong foundation of understanding of a number of ideas. So the first one is called The Innovator's Dilemma. It's a great book written by a Harvard Business School professor. His name is, and sadly, he passed away,
Yeah.
Ray Christensen. The Innovator's Dilemma is all about how successful companies can make all the right incremental decisions along the way and still fail because they're disrupted by companies that come along, have a different point of view on the problem being solved, and end up being a disruptor, while the company with the innovator's dilemma, they just keep serving their most profitable customers, and they get marginalized by the disruptor that's coming up in behind them. So the rule here is it's better to disrupt yourself
Yes.
to be disrupted by, an outside, a third party. And so the book and that whole idea gives you not only an intellectual sort of understanding of it, but also, I think, I want to say emotional, but uh, yeah, a courage kind of understanding of it as well, because you do need to, when it comes to strategic renewal, you over a long period of time, you do need to disrupt yourself in one way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you got any examples of companies that have got that right? I mean, there's well documented examples. Kodak is the hackneyed one that gets trotted out all the time. But
Yeah, well, I'd say generally speaking, the number of companies that get it right are in rarefied air.
Yes.
I'm
Right.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I think so I think probably Apple does a pretty good job
Yeah.
of that. If
Yeah,
you
they do.
if you think about their journey, how many times the Mac has been reinvented and invalidated, prior generations of Macintosh. How the iPod got to be such a incredible product and then became a feature of an
Yeah.
iPhone. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and so I think they've got a great track record there. I think a very very recent example, and sadly, I say it sadly, I don't I don't take joy in seeing people get disrupted, but I think Intel's an example of someone that's struggled with the innovator's dilemma. And my guess is uh, there's um, probably some regret that they didn't embrace ARM somewhere along
Yeah.
the way. And what they did is they tried to give the x86 CPU, ARM kinds of characteristics around
Yeah.
power consumption, et cetera. But when they could have really just jumped on the ARM bandwagon and
Yeah.
done some of the things that Apple, for example, has done with ARM, they could have done it first, and they could have owned not only x86 world, they could have owned the ARM world. Probably a similar idea in the area of GPUs,
Yeah.
um, cellular and other types of modems that we take for granted these days, and so forth. So yeah, it's not easy, and
No, sure.
it's not an easy thing. But I remember at Citrix, along the way we invited Professor Christensen to come down from Boston and spend a day and a half with us, and he he just it was a great session. He did a presentation, but then we talked with him about our business and where we should be paying attention to being disrupted, and the kinds of things we should be doing organizationally, technologically, et cetera. And he really inspired us to take that on in a much more serious way.
You see it time and time again. In the automotive industry, in the technology industry, all over the place. There's always, I'm now involved part of my time in the craft beer industry. It's funny. You talk about serving the people who helped you in the past. I'm helping Gareth, who was my right hand man for many years at Softcat, to set up and grow us. Initially a micro. Well, we call it a nano brewery at the minute. We're trying to become a micro brewery, and that market it's a continual cycle because the successful new and interesting brewers get bought up by the big companies who then make their product boring, and then another one comes up. So we just want to be the next one,
right?
Coming up and making interesting, exciting beer. Really,
yeah.
got to keep innovating.
Yeah. So in order to, I think, act on the learnings from the innovator's dilemma, you need to sort of it's what we talked about before, having a growth mindset and a growth mindset. There's a fantastic book called The Growth Mindset, and the premise of the book is pretty simple, and that is, you know, most people think that they're wired a certain way, and they're either wired for growth or they're not wired for growth. So the growth mindset tries to break that assumption by showing that you can actually learn and teach yourself to have a growth mindset, and why it's a very successful book, a very important idea, because kind of what goes on between your ears defines what it is you have the courage to do or not do. So this gives you the courage to be curious, to make assumptions, check your assumptions that sort of got you here. It gives you the wherewithal to question some of the fundamental ideas that a business or that even your leadership style is based upon, and it's a great way to push yourself, but it's also a book that helps you introspect, because you really can't develop yourself until you know yourself, and
Right.
knowing yourself means introspection.
Yeah.
And looking in that mirror and being, really brutally honest about, where are your flat spots, where can you develop, et cetera.
Yeah.
And this book,
Yeah.
Growth Mindset, is a great tool for getting there.
Without that baseline, you're just paying lip service to growth mindset.
I know we're going to come on to it a little bit later, but one of the things that we are able to do with the assessments that we run, so we're going to talk about the 5 dysfunctions or the 5 behaviors. Our starting point is we get our clients to do DISC, and that is a great self-reflection, but out of DISC. So that is, are you active, fast-paced, assertive and bold, or are you more moderate and calm about how you go about things? Or are you open to new ideas and very empathetic and people focused, or are you more questioning and skeptical? And that, on that circle, you then get to plot yourself, which I did it even just with the students yesterday. And then that's why I'm slower at making decisions on things, but I'm still getting to those decisions. But one of the things that comes out of it is we're able to give leaders a comparison report, and it's on a spectrum of, are you open-minded, or do you have a fixed mindset, or are you open to new ideas? And it compares you to the people that you're working with. And it just gives you that, I didn't realize actually that I was so fixed in my ideas. I do realize that I need to do that. So having tools that help us do this as well now is so valuable.
That exercise is powerful.
It's really
especially if it's done, on a team basis, because team can understand each other better. And, great teams, not everyone is, it's a jigsaw puzzle, right?
It is absolutely a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah.
So just everyone, when they're honest, and you do an exercise like that, you can understand, where flat spots are on the team.
Exactly.
And then others can then be respectful in how they, compliment people who have a flat spot here or there.
Yeah. Well, it's one of my favorite exercises to do, actually, because we get the team to draw their map and guess where each other is, and that self-reflection of where do I think I am versus where other people perceive that it's a really powerful exercise to do. And then, as you say, you can see, we've got nobody seeking clarity in this team. We really need to do some work there. How are we going to fill that gap that we've got? Yeah.
Guided growth mindset. That's the way ahead.
Yeah, it applies. I mean, you don't always like to use athletics and sports as the metaphor, but, on a football field, you know, you know that this person, has an incredible left foot,
Yeah.
but not an incredible right foot. And
Yeah.
so you feed the ball to the left foot, et cetera. So it's sort of having that understanding across a team around where the strengths are,
Yeah.
and because you need that diversity of strengths, and no one is the full picture usually.
Sadly, I think I'm the one with two left feet.
I'll fight you for that one, Sam.
Football was never my strong point, or soccer for our American listeners.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think while we're doing books and stocking fillers, there was another one we wanted to talk about, wasn't there? The Leaders Make the Future.
yeah, yeah. This is a great book, and because first of all, the title, "Leaders Make the Future," right? It's it it, it basically says just in the title that um, leaders, take ownership of the future, right? And take responsibility for leading into the future. And whether you're the CEO leader or you're leader in a marketing organization or an engineering group, it doesn't matter. Leaders are all over the place in great companies. The question is, do leaders, are they proactive and do they own it, or are they waiting for guidance and instructions and so forth? So that's one of the things I love about the title itself.
Mm.
I think the second thing is the book is written by Bob Johansson, and Bob recently retired from the Institute for the Future, and his reputation is he's one of the very few futurists that was a futurist for so long that he actually
Things started to come true.
lived
Amazing.
to experience whether his predictions and all were true.
That's
And
brilliant.
and the fact is, he did an amazing job. And
Does that make him a historian now then?
I'm not sure he would want that label, but nevertheless, the thing the thing that I took away from the book is not only what I just said about taking responsibility for making the future, and not being a victim of circumstances, but also the way you do that is by having an opinion about the future and having that opinion felt in such a strong way that you were willing to bet on it.
Yeah.
So lots of times people have an opinion, but they're not willing to bet on it. But I think, the great leaders that we have all either known or seen or read about, et cetera, they had a very clear opinion about the future, and it was so strong they were willing to bet on it. Whether you're thinking about incredible leaders like Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt, or other leaders like Steve Jobs, and even today Elon Musk. They're very, very opinionated people, and almost to a fault, but you respect them because they're betting, they're putting it all on the line.
Yeah.
On that opinion.
And by doing that, they're literally bending the future to their will.
Correct. And I think that the book is where I learned this term called VUCA. VUCA is a term that was developed in the late or in 1989-ish time frame, and it was done in a think tank um, uh, uh, of high-level government planners, where they had to lay down a set of assumptions about the future to then understand, how to plan for that future. And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so they basically said the future was going to be defined by these characteristics. So, and then, they added obviously some definitions in each one of them, and the book does outline those. And I felt so strongly that they were spot on that we adopted this view of the future and built it into our messaging and that the value that we would deliver as a company in a world, in a VUCA world where our customers would be dealing with that, and it allow us to not only have a message for today in terms of helping them deal with a VUCA world, but also allowed us to show the level of empathy that would help them navigate that world in the future and anticipate the needs that they would have, when you had geophysical, geopolitical, generational, and other kinds of disruptions that businesses, let's just say, would not have control over.
It doesn't feel to me like we're in any less of a VUCA world than we were in 1989. But
Right.
I guess that's, that stuff is a constant and will always be a constant. So you absolutely need to prepare yourself and your business for the unexpected.
Yes.
Or try and expect the unexpected as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And so, how do you plan, for a maximum level of flexibility around the things that are outside of your control, right? And I think that was the spirit of reading that book and internalizing it, to understand there are things that are outside of our control. So what can we do from a building flexibility into our strategic plan, so that when events outside of our own control happen, that we can flex to them and either go around them or actually use them as tailwind in some cases.
Some fab stocking fillers that we're coming up with here. Vicky, yours is probably the 5 behaviors, is it?
It was my stocking filler, 7 years ago now, when we started the Amplified group. And I absolutely consumed all of Lencioni's books that summer and just learned so much from all his fables. But Mark, I know you and I had an exchange about whether it was the 5 behaviors or the 5 dysfunctions, because you know it as the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Yeah. I still remember the conversation of you telling me about you reading it on your plane on a red eye over to iForum.
Yes. It's probably the one reading that changed the course of my career, more than any other single thing.
Wow.
And, so a very good friend of mine, still a great friend, the executive headhunter, and he came to see me, and he very sheepishly reached into his briefcase and handed me this book. And I looked at it and it said, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I looked up and I said, Eric, are you telling me that my team is screwed up? And Mark, I'm not telling you anything. I'm just telling you to read the book.
Yeah.
So it was within the next 2 weeks, we were holding our iForum in Edinburgh. And, I had to, it's a red eye to Heathrow and then change planes to then head up to Edinburgh. So I started reading the book, and typically on a red eye, I'm trying to sleep, so I've got enough energy the next day. But I got into this book, and it captured me because I identified with all the characters in the book, including the CEO, and the kinds of problems the CEO was struggling with. And so it just grabbed me, and I couldn't put it down. By the time I got to Edinburgh, and checked into the Sheraton that was walking distance from the Edinburgh Conference Center. I in those days it was still dial up.
Yeah, yeah,
So I dialed up and I got on Amazon, and Amazon was primarily still a bookseller. And I ordered a copy of the book for each of my execs, and sent them a note and told them that they would be receiving this book, and that in the book there's an exercise for teams to do, and that we would be finding a time to do the exercise as a team.
yeah,
And so that set us on the path of really understanding how we could build a functional team,
yes,
and
yeah,
allowed us to adopt the language of functional teams and also the characteristics of functional teams. And in thinking about the exchange we had, you at Amplified Group are actually helping teams solve this problem. So you're defining these things as best practice behaviors of
we
function.
are, we are.
And
Yeah.
the book is written in such a way to help you identify
Yes,
dysfunctions and diagnose them as dysfunctions so that
yeah,
you actually undertake change in behavior
yeah,
or change in the team,
yes,
literally
yeah,
changing out,
yeah,
people on the team.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've absolutely built a business off it. I mean, we've extended it because, funnily enough, the 5 dysfunctions on its own, if you just try and get organizations to realize that they need to do that, that if they don't have that growth mindset, which I have to say a lot of sales leaders we struggle with don't necessarily have that naturally, we've extended it, and we realized that actually what we needed to do was help organizations. And actually this was working with the Chasm Group as well, because we had Paul Weefels from the Chasm Group on, and he was talking about speed to market. And it wasn't just about tech, it's about how you organize your troops. And so putting the two together, we've actually incorporated the methodology behind the 5 dysfunctions of a team into how do we measure speed of execution. And we've actually got a metric on that, and we're benchmarking the tech industry. But the cornerstone of everything that we do is through the 5 behaviors. But that comes in, so we have 4 pillars that we measure, which is purpose, trust, clarity, and simplicity. And you know that the simplicity one absolutely comes from you. With the podcast that we did last time, which was the simpler you keep things, the faster that you can go. And I think I've told you many times that we've quoted you on that. If you had royalties on that, but the trust one is where we go deep into the 5 behaviors, because that's really if you don't have that piece right,
it's the keystone that holds it all together, right?
It is, yeah.
And that means people have to do hard things. They have to be vulnerable.
Yes.
They have to look deep into their souls and share those things, because we're all victims of the scars that we accumulate along the way, starting in childhood. I mean, we're all parents here, and when children, they're blank pieces of paper when they're born, and we do inflict scars on our children unknowingly, because no one's perfect as a parent. And so getting in touch with kind of all the things that have shaped us and going deep on that and sharing that and being vulnerable about it, to me is the essence of having people trust each other and understand each other. And it's a powerful exercise to do. But
really
also it's difficult for a lot of people to get that deep and level of sharing.
And then from extending on that to learning how to have conflict and productive conflict and the conflict continuum that Lencioni talks about. So it's about being able to have that really robust debate in search of the best ideas. And one of the things that we love talking about is you can't fix secrets. You have to have things out on the table to be able to fix them. And so we go hunting for those secrets. And it's magic, honestly.
Yeah.
Really is magic.
Yeah. Well, I think teams, like great teams, again, going back to the sports metaphor, they're talking on the field constantly.
Yes.
And, to be in the best position or calling a play or, gee, hey, Vicky, you're looking winded. You need to take a break here for, 3 minutes and et cetera, and get your wind back and so forth. And great teams do talk to each other, but I think business teams, can, especially in a world of remote working,
yes,
and can fall down in
absolutely
this very, very easily.
Not
talk
that's
to
a
each
good
other.
point. I think that's one of the reasons our business has taken off as much as it has, is because remote working has caused, because we've always known silos are a problem, but they have been exacerbated through working remotely. They really have.
They've broken those casual interactions where kind of parallel teams might just sort of bump into each other and half the time of day, and which is a shame. I think
you have to be more deliberate and intentional about it, I think, than you had to previously.
Yeah, and I think what's underappreciated about the casual interactions is that that's where people tend to let their guard down. They tend to be more vulnerable and more sharing, and you get to more understanding. And so it's not like standing around the water cooler and talking about the product launch.
No.
You can do that in a meeting room. All right. You can do it on Zoom. All right.
Yeah.
But if you're,
it's relationships, isn't it? It's building relationships, and that doesn't happen. So a lot of what we do is encouraging people to still, even if you're meeting virtually, just spend some time to start with. Go slow to go fast, to build those relationships, and then you can get into the business, because people will walk over hot coals for you if you've got the relationship in the first place. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry. I feel very passionately about it.
It's perfect, and my guess is everyone listening to this podcast has experienced that moment when they got an insight about someone on their team that they didn't have before. It was like, wow, I didn't know Mary, had that experience. So that explains why Mary comes at these problems from this direction. So now I can have a lot more respect for what Mary's saying, because I better understand the context of what she's saying, and then maybe as a leader you can help shape or persuade Mary, or if necessary, so that Mary will come around and then commit to an idea that maybe she wasn't originally supportive of.
Exactly.
Everyone's had that experience.
Yeah.
It comes from being very very conscious of understanding others around on our team at a deeper level than just what are they responsible for on the team.
Yes. Yeah. I'm constantly saying what we do is not rocket science, but you have to be deliberate and intentional about it. And actually, it can be, back to our point here about growth mindset, it can be learned.
Yeah.
It absolutely can. And the five dysfunctions really highlights that. So, Sam, I know we've got another book to get to. Yes.
Oh, yeah. We wanted to talk about financially stuff, didn't we?
Yeah.
So this is interesting to me, because when I was young and trying to be as upcoming as possible, Martin, our then, I guess it was the MD, or maybe he moved to chief exec by that point, but either way, he sent me on a day's course that was entitled Finance for Non-Financial Managers.
Right.
Because I always pretended to be number blind. I wasn't number blind, but I was more interested in strategy and people and things than actually numbers. And I realize now that numbers are just a tool to help you understand that stuff better. So I'm really interested in your perspective on that, because that, I must say, that course really helped me.
Yeah. So, this comes up because, in business, in a for-profit business, let's just say it that way, um, the obligation is to grow and make a profit. And if you don't, you're not going to last long, of course. And so I think it's incumbent on everyone in a company to be financially literate. Some people will have gone to business school, either undergraduate or master's, et cetera. They're usually in pretty good shape. But generally speaking, I think most organizations are not financially literate enough for everyone then to understand why certain decisions are being made that affect them, and then further how they can make better decisions by having financial literacy around knowing the difference between an income statement and a balance sheet, right? Knowing, that just because a company has a huge pile of cash on their balance sheet doesn't mean that they can spend all that money on X, Y, and Z.
Or even simple things like the difference between net profit and gross profit.
Sure. Yeah, and things like contribution margins and taxes at a high level, and some of the basic terminologies necessary. Because I think that if you think about all the things that we've talked about, having a functional team, seizing the future and making it happen, understanding, the old notion of disrupting oneself to avoid being disrupted from the outside, having a growth mindset, all of these things, they're all directed at a better business, a business that grows, a business that makes a profit. Unless you have that basic financial literacy, you can't map all that other stuff to the outcome you're looking for, and that is business growth, the profitable growth. So I always encouraged this idea of financial literacy. And at Citrix, we did have a course called Finance for Non-Financial Managers. And I learned that, when I went to business school and got my master's, the school I went to has one of the best executive education programs in the world. And that's one of the most popular courses that they have. And so you can take this online. There are lots of them out there. Again, going back to self-development, this would be something that I hope that everyone that's listening to this podcast, if they aren't financially literate, that they put on their gift list to themselves for this holiday season, that they'll take that course and become financially literate, and they'll be so much more valuable to their businesses. They'll have so much more understanding of decisions that are being made that have impact on their part of the business, and it'll bring their anxiety down quite a bit by having that financial literacy.
We at some point put in a commercial finance function at Softcat, and I sort of started off seeing them as the enemy because they wanted to run the numbers and block something that my intuition told me was the right thing to do. And actually, after working with them for a little while, I worked out that actually they were an ally, because if they could prove, so far as you can through modeling, that the thing that I intuited was the right thing to invest in would produce a return, we would invest in it because we'd be silly not to. So actually, getting that understanding is really important. And that was certainly, I've probably forgotten it all now, but that was certainly something that was immensely useful to me at a relatively early stage in my sort of senior career, as it were.
Yeah, and that literacy, doesn't mean that you shut down ideas,
No, of course not.
that don't have a short-term payback. The
Yeah.
literacy allows you to, understand, okay, I'm going to make this decision, and I have to set expectations with the organization, with shareholders, whoever, in such a way that they understand, what
Yeah.
the trajectory is. So, you know, public investors hate when companies do acquisitions that are dilutive, which
Yeah.
means, which means that, you do a transaction and it actually dilutes your earnings,
Your value. Yeah.
dilute your growth rate. It could dilute a lot of things, right? It could dilute shareholders from an ownership perspective in some cases. They do that because it's strategically the right thing to do. And therefore, you prepare everyone that we're going to do this. We're going to take a hit, in the short term, but in the long term, this is going to power the business forward. And
Mm.
I can point to, like, in the Citrix journey, a number of acquisitions we did that were dilutive, where we were punished by investors, but we were able to explain to them that, yes, this is dilutive in the short term, but this is the value that it's adding to the business in the long
Mm.
term. And when we bought a little company called Expert City, that turned into GoToMeeting,
Mm.
all of a sudden, years later, people said, well, this was a brilliant thing to do. When
Yeah.
we bought a company called NetScaler, which was very dilutive. Again, it didn't take long before everyone understood, what the financial sort of um,
Mm.
value was to the company. So, that's a key aspect of financial literacy.
Yeah. I liken it a bit to music theory. So there's a school of thought out there that if you're a musician, you're intuitive and you're playing by ear, and you kind of go with the flow and you get into that flow state. And actually, if you learn musical theory, that might restrict you in your creativity. And I mean, I am by no means a fantastic musician. I know just enough musical theory to get by, but blooming heck, it helps me get there faster when I'm writing bass lines for songs, because you know what stuff to choose from. I think it does make sense.
It's
Yeah.
more informed decisions, isn't it?
Yeah, but informed decisions, that's exactly the way
Yeah.
the way it
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
So we normally ask our guests for a book recommendation, but I think we've kind of done that. Our 3 or 4 Christmas executive stocking fillers, shall we call them, something like that. I don't know whether we need to be talking about executive stockings, but there we go. So in lieu of that, Mark, perhaps you could help us to wrap up by taking us through 3 key takeaways, or as many key takeaways as you want.
Yeah.
You are our esteemed and probably our most listened to guest, so you can have as few or as many takeaways as you choose.
Let's talk about takeaways, but I do have one more book that
Oh, go on then.
I want to and talk about, and it's a children's book, actually. And the name of the book, and perhaps many parents that are listening to this podcast will know this book. It's called The Velveteen Rabbit.
Oh, wow, I remember that from when I was a kid.
It was written in 1932 by Marjorie Williams. And as is the case in a lot of children's books, there's an adult message to it,
Mm.
that has a lesson, but in the children's story, there's an entertainment value to it, right? So the Velveteen Rabbit is all about authenticity, and it's about a very posh rabbit that is given as a gift, who through the course of the book, and not to be a spoiler here, um, becomes real. So there's a sort of a whimsical uh, fantasy sort of dimension to this book, and it's a super important book, because the most powerful thing you can be is authentic and real, which means a whole set of things about vulnerability, being honest, a lot of the things that we've already talked about. And this book, in some ways, is the takeaway. All right. Um, and the interesting short story, my introduction to the book is um, I had a professor early in my college time in college who thought our class, everyone in it, that we were full of crap, that we were all plastic and not being real, right? So one class he didn't show up, and he left an excerpt from the Velveteen Rabbit on everybody's chair. And we went in and we looked at it and read it, and we decided his name was Bill Mitchell. We someone said Bill's finally gone over the edge. He's probably run off to join the circus. And some of us said, no, Bill's trying to tell us something. We just don't know what he's trying to tell us. So that would have been 1971. My oldest son was born in 1983. So literally 12, 13 years later, when he was gifted this book, The Velveteen Rabbit, and I had him sitting on my lap and I was reading it to him because I was reading the entire book. All right. It finally registered what Bill Mitchell was trying to tell us. He was trying to tell us that we were being plastic and superficial, and not being real and authentic. It made a huge impact on me, and I always used it to help develop others that had very high potential, but were afraid to, be vulnerable and be authentic, etc., and thought that authenticity was a sign of weakness. So I highly recommend that book. And I think so many people probably listening to this podcast will say, yeah, I read that book, but I didn't internalize it to myself.
The message,
myself, right? So go back and read it. Get it from the bookshelf you have from your children, and read it again. And
I remember reading or being read that when I was a kid. Now, I wonder if it's more of an American. So I spent 5 years of my childhood between about the age of 5 to 10 in Southern California. So I presume I know it from there.
My recollection is that Marjorie Williams is British.
Right.
Well, maybe, but it
maybe
definitely feels like something that is popular in America, but
could be.
Yeah.
But maybe not so much over here. So it's probably an even better recommendation.
Yeah, it could be like the
that's
Moody
what I
Blues.
thought,
The Moody Blues were a British band that actually was more popular in the United States.
True. But when you first told me that story, Mark, I think, when we were prepping for this, the whole story of being authentic, I think I have learned that myself more over the last, maybe since COVID, in the last 4 years, and it actually feels like it's set me free. And the more authentic I am, and the more myself I am, and the more honest I am about how I'm feeling. So I'll kick off an exec meeting for the first time, and I'll tell the person I'm speaking to that I've got sweaty palms, that I'm feeling nervous about it.
Right.
And it feels like it set me free, because the more I'm like that, the more confidence I get to be more me, and the more successful we seem to be being as a team. So it's such a powerful story.
Yeah.
Do you think you get more confidence to be authentic the older you get, or the more experienced you get, and maybe the less you start to care about what other people think about you?
Yeah.
Well, for some people it manifests itself in that way. It's like, I don't care what someone thinks about me. I don't like to think of it that way. I just like to think of it that you get, first of all, as you get older, you understand yourself better.
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
And you're more accepting of yourself.
Yes.
Right? and therefore you're more comfortable in your own skin.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and in order to achieve the level of authenticity and to do that earlier in your career, you have to you have to set out to know yourself and be honest with yourself. And that's why some of the
Yeah.
things we talked about, as a leader, ask your team, how can I be better? Evaluate yourself on an annual basis and then decide what it is you're going to do to improve. All of those things are acts of authenticity that then you just get more comfortable in your own skin, because in order to be yourself, you have to understand and accept yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's
but it's a very natural
good.
thing later in your career. And it's the old compound interest message. The earlier you can get
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
the more
Yeah.
years you have to compound interest on that understanding.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And
Yeah.
then
It goes all the way back to Socrates, that gnote se auton, know thyself.
yes, yeah, amen. And then I think the takeaways that of the conversation we've had, it starts with the whole idea of owning your development, and that comes from having a deep understanding of yourself and where your flat spots are, and being honest with yourself about them, and being authentic about that, and sharing those things with others. Secondly, it's about having an attitude that you're going to be a lifelong learner, that you have to keep pushing yourself and developing yourself, and that means having the mind of a student, and always having that innocence that students have for the most part, and being curious about learning more and more, and pushing yourself. And then the third sort of thing is, it underscores then this whole notion of having a growth mindset, because it can be learned. These are not
Yeah.
things that necessarily you have to be wired for, right?
Yeah.
And so they are skills that you can learn.
Brilliant. Well, what a Christmas gift for our listeners that is.
Yeah, and give the gift to yourself. Just
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
one of my gifts to myself was this Christmas sport coat. But
I love it. I absolutely love it. I want one.
I kind of like it, but I'm still on the edge. So I left the tag on in case I need to return it.
No, I think it's magnificent. I think you should absolutely wear it until you wear holes in the elbows or whatever over this Christmas period. It's fabulous.
All right, Sam. All right, Sam. I'll take that.
Absolutely brilliant.
I'll take that compliment and that advice.
I just hope we can find a way of publishing a photo when we publish this, because it's absolutely magnificent. The most festive thing I've seen this year.
Well, with that, I want to say that, it's been a joy to be on Amplified podcast again, especially the Christmas special.
Absolutely.
I love Christmas specials, by the way, and it's always special to talk to you all. And
thank you.
I wish you, your families, and everyone, a very, very happy holiday, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate this time of year, a time for reflection and renewal and joy and hope for the future. I wish everyone just a wonderful, wonderful year-end time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. It's just wonderful to have you on. We, especially at this busy time of year, it's so good of you to join us and share some pearls of wisdom for us and for our listeners. Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Well, it just remains for me to say, first of all, a very Merry Christmas indeed to all our listeners. We hope you have a great festive period. Thank you, as always, for listening to Get Amplified from the Amplified Group. Your comments, your subscriptions are gratefully received.